All right, so we're going to turn to Mettā today. And Mettā, I'm not a fan of the translation of loving kindness. I think that's certainly true, but to me, it's too mild a term. I really, because I think Mettā is really pointing to the source and the absolute of the pure love, this beginning of where pure love comes from. And that's so much more than that. I mean, it's all the Brahma Viharas we practice are derivatives of Mettā. So to me, it's more that I've been starting to use the term unborn love. I think the idea of it being always in existence really captivates or captures it more. And also, to me, with the experience of the absolute is it's objective. We bring our subjectiveness to the things that we relate to, and it doesn't function in that way. People will talk about God as though God's a person. I know when I was young in the Christian church, they even showed us photographs of this old white guy with long hair, long beard, and to realize that there is no personification. That's a human overlay. And of course, making it patriarchal as well was culturally acceptable. But if anything, I've talked to other teachers about this, and our opinion is that the absolute would skew more feminine than masculine if we were talking about it, because it's more generative in terms of its energy and function. So calling God he really never works for me when I hear that. But it's that love, the source of love. So imagining this location that has this pure love that doesn't have any skin in the game. Like it's not keeping track, and Todd gets a little and Mark gets a lot. It's not like a human where we're deciding who's in and who's out. Everybody is the same, and it's really on our end as a recipient. That's what conditions how we receive it, how we relate to it. It's always here in full supply. We're the ones that don't think we should have it, or we don't think we're good enough, we're entitled. All these different stories we have. So part of the practice when we do like Mettā practice is it helps us soften those barriers, those beliefs that I've done these bad things, I'm a bad person, I'm unlovable, whatever the core story is, the core wound is. So it's helping to soften that belief and those convictions, and that's what supports our identity, our sense of me, our sense of a self is based on these assumptions and conclusions we've made based on how people have interacted with us, particularly our birth family. Those are the kind of the core messages, and then we often will bring those into the world and be projecting them. I mean, I'm sure you've all had the experience of realizing somebody you were interacting with some difficulty reminded you of a family member that's challenging. So we do this all the time, that we're projecting. So with Mettā, we're pulling back from all that, and we're orienting towards the source. And again, the functional, I had a really hard time languaging how the absolute works, because it's unchanging, and yet it does change. So it doesn't have birth and death the way we know that. So it's always in existence, but it somehow has a wisdom. So the wisdom gets fed in some way and adapts and becomes more on point or more specific. And it does it through, the only word I have is generative. It's a generative kind of energy where it takes in, and then from that ends up influencing the growth of the whole somehow. And anyway, I'm not sure if I'm making sense at all, but that's the only way I can describe how it functions. And so that's why when we orient to it, we're orienting to something that's not personal, yet it can be very intimate. It's not subject to the whims. I remember being frightened at one point as a youngster when the priest was telling us how God was watching us all the time and keeping track of everything we did. And I was like, oh shit, I don't think I want that. And of course, then I already was disqualifying myself. Well, I'm clearly not going to be in line here because, I stole a pack of gum last year or something. And anyway, but to know that that's just human overlay, because there's a great book I read when I was in Interfaith Seminary called The History of God. And it's fascinating to read because God started, if you view God as a concept, look at it as a social concept, God started when the people were tribal. And so part of the Old Testament vengeful God was to make sure people stayed together in the tribe, because you were strong as a tribe. If people left to go to the other tribes or other cities or things, you would weaken your tribe. So you need to create this fear of, if you're outside the tribe, you're in danger. And so that's where the vengeful God started. You must make God happy. You have to follow the rules. You got to do it the right way. And then as humans evolved and got to where the tribal system wasn't our main way of living, then the New Testament could come in, where there was more love and all the, a lot softer kind of God. Even though the absolute didn't change, the human application of God did. And so that's important to understand, that a lot of our understanding is based on cultural influences and what was happening in the world at the time. So anyway, all this to say that it's important to hold the absolute really with a kind of question mark. We never fully know what it is. We can't know in an ordinary way. Like, it's not a logical kind of relationship. It's very intuitive and experiential. So it's more about the feeling. That's why I emphasize feeling on all these practices, getting the feeling tone, so you get used to the resonance of it all. And that helps you identify when one is functioning in the absolute. It's possible to journey into all kinds of things, but it's helpful if you can know the discernment of the different qualities, to know that this is love here, this is peace, whatever it happens to be. And so that's what morphed into my doing the guided meditation, so people could taste all these for themselves and get to know the felt sense. Because it's not quite the same. We don't all have the same flavor palette, let's say. So how it shows up is very individualistic, but similar. So any questions or comments before we do some meditation?